Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to the Gospel Underground podcast. This is episode 160. Got a lot of podcasts in the book, Jesse. Why are Christians so political? Do they just want power? We are broadcasting live. Well, live for us with power from the worldwide headquarters here in Blacksburg, Virginia. We're glad to be back in the headquarters. We had a little bit of a break from our normally scheduled series on answers, right? We're talking about giving good answers to questions people have when they ask us for the reason, the hope we have. Last week, we had the Wrestlers on.
You had
Jesse.
the Wrestlers on. It was a great episode.
Stronger Together. Hope you listen to that, guys. Just some kind of a volunteer ministry I'm doing kind of on the side with the wrestling team. It's evangelism, discipleship, building young guys. It's for me, it was fun listening to them. Because a lot of times, as a leader, you don't know what everyone's getting and not getting until you hear them talk about it. And so it was fun for me to listen to those young men talk about their new faith in Christ for them, and then how they're growing in grace and how that's integrated with something that's very important to them. They're like, these guys one's a national champion, right? One's a 3-time All-American. How it integrates with their sport. It was really fun. And so I hope you guys liked that Stronger Together.
And they're fun
episode.
guys. It's a fun listen.
We had a great time, except for me making a dunderhead mistake where we were 12 minutes into the episode and I looked and I had nothing recording at any place. So we had to start
I'm sure those
over.
guys are really giving that to you too.
That's
a very rare thing for you to do.
It's a rookie mistake, isn't it? That's a rookie mistake.
Those are the things I do, but not you.
No, I did. Oh, I did it.
You did it, so you do it.
I didn't like myself for doing it, and I had to take that to Jesus and have my identity in Him and not my performance.
Go get an ice barrel.
Yeah,
do
just
some prayer.
pray and listen to the daily liturgy from Quorum Deo Church. You guys should listen to the daily liturgy. Hey, Jesse, we're in this. This came out of our Asseldar series, right? We did this. Hey, how do we?
Came out of our Asseldar is like, I don't know. Those words seem like they should be separated by a little bit longer of a pause.
Yeah, we talked about how do we live as wise witnesses today. We have to in Asseldar, right? Living among people, share your life, share the gospel, listen to people well. Be disruptive a little bit. Help people doubt their assumptions.
Right?
Not
that we're going backwards this time in this answer. This world, but that's a bit of what we're doing today, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So disrupt. Keep going.
Answers. Give good answers. And so we've been and then repeat.
Yeah.
So we've been breaking out this. Why should we have good answers ready? Why should be ready? So we started with Christian apologetics, Jesse. Like why? Like if I were to ask you to see if you're listening on the podcast here, why should people have some basic Christian? Why do you believe in God? Why do you think Jesus is special? Why do you trust the Bible? Why should we have some of that in our toolkit as a Christian? Or is it a waste of our time?
Yeah, no, I think it's not a waste of our time, because whether you feel called to be an apologist, I'm putting air quotes on that, a defender of the faith or not, we're all really supposed to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have and to do it with gentleness and respect, according to 1 Peter 3:15. So, as we're doing life with people and someone, I tell people all the time, like, you don't have to understand kind of source critical. You don't have to know when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. You don't need to know when the date of the first John manuscript was that we have. But you do need to know how to tell someone about Jesus.
That's right.
You might need to help them at least understand just some of the basics of the faith.
And if you have a friend, like yesterday, one of the guys we're baptizing on Saturday said, hey, my roommate doesn't believe in God, but I've been trying to talk to him. What do I do? And so many of us feel that way. And so when someone does ask you about trusting the Bible, it's good to send them a website or something, a link. Hey, read this and see what you think about it. So last time Jesse and I were together, we shifted from basic Christian truths that we want to be able to articulate and defend to cultural apologetics. In other words, we live in a cultural stream. There are ideas, there's people, there's religions, there's philosophies, there's loves, there's worship all around us, right? And we want to engage with the questions people have now. Right. And these do change over time. The things that we're not probably talking to people, well, maybe soon about polygamy. We're not talking about multiple wives, maybe polyandry or polyamory. Maybe we're talking about that. But questions that people have in our cultural moment. And so we're going to do a series of those. And guys, listen, this isn't going to be, you heard the introduction. This is on Why Are Christians So Political? This isn't a political episode for Jesse and me in the sense that we're trying to spend half an hour on a political philosophy,
right?
And how you should vote or not vote. We're not doing that. There are implications for those things, but what we care about is that today people may say, well, Christians or evangelical Christians, evangelical Protestants, maybe even white ones, right, are just political.
Yeah, white evangelicals are just Republicans.
That's right. That's right. Or mainline Protestants are just Democrats.
Democrats,
right?
Yep, just beholden to a party.
That's right. So whether on the left or the right, Christians are captured and just political creatures.
And there's enough. And just to be fair, there's enough anecdotal evidence. Just go on Facebook and you can support the theory. That Christianity in America is just political,
politicized people doing their political wills, trying to take power, keep power over others. And so you might be asked today, right? Why are they so political and just care about power? Why are they so political? And so each of these cultural questions in the next few episodes, guys, we're going to do something called, we're going to do facts and then strategy. Facts is just simply, okay, for us behind the scenes looking at, hey, is this claim true, right? Or what are the facts associated with this claim? These are not the facts we're giving you to bludgeon other people with. We want you to have a strategy of how to talk to people about this question, and that's part 2. Now, it may include some facts. You may want to reveal some facts as you go, but to start a fight with somebody when they ask us a genuine question is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to, remember Asseldart, we're trying to listen, and we're trying to disrupt their preconceived notions so that they might be open to hear about Jesus, right? That's our game plan here with Asseldar, is to talk about Jesus Christ crucified, risen from the dead for us and our salvation, right? And for our friends. So some of the facts, Jesse, this one was a little shocking to you. This came from a set of graphs that was looking at something called the Cooperative Election Study from 2020. This is from Ryan Burge, who teaches at Eastern Illinois University.
Yeah, and you mentioned this was surprising to me. I like to think of myself as a smart guy.
Hey, I ain't no dumb guy.
I'm not a dullard, okay? and even in terms, I teach a class on theology and culture. One of our weeks is on politics. I'm pretty well informed. This was shocking to me this morning, looking at this graph and just going, this is way different than what, at least what sort of the narrative is.
And there's a couple reasons for this, right, Jesse? There's a reason that, one, people say stuff about Christians in politics. Christians say something to each other a lot today about who who is politically captured, right? There's people writing books from more of the right and the left within Christianity against each other, right? So you think, the Christians are the most political people ever. But the Cooperative Election Study, and the Ryan Burge has a couple graphs. You can find these on his Twitter, actually, or his X account, at Ryan Burge. This is looking at the number of political actions. Maybe you're giving money. Maybe you're going to a rally or a campaign, working as a campaign worker. Looking at the number of political actions in 2020 by faith or no faith. And you have to go pretty far down to find, say, evangelical Protestants. In fact, at the top, atheist, Jewish, agnostic, Buddhist, mainline Protestants, right? White Catholic, Muslim, right? You have to go pretty far down to even get to evangelicals.
By the way, there are tier breaks too, so that it's a pretty big gap between, say, mainline and then white Catholic dropping below.
That's right.
That's pretty significant.
We'll put the link in the show notes to these graphs. And then there's also a regression model with controlling for gender, race, income, and age. Just say, well, maybe young people are skewing this or older people skewing this. But it holds that this is kind of the order of the most politically active being atheists, right? And this doesn't shock me, Jesse, this particular fact, because if you don't believe in God, the highest authority that there is probably the government. And so you're going to be well vested probably in action to say, well, who's that, right? Who's the government? I want to know. And so it's just not true that these Christians out there are these overwhelming political things. Now, people wonder why they're voting for people. Now, we can talk, if we wanted to, about if your friend asks you, well, why do all these Christians vote for Donald Trump? Isn't he a profligate, amoral person? I don't think Trump is immoral. I think, well, he does immoral things, but I think he's amoral. I think he just thinks morality just doesn't apply. I do what I want, right?
Yeah.
And so that question could have come up that we might, but right now we're looking at the facts. So the facts are, no, Christians actually aren't the most political people in America. Now
that strikes me Reed, I think this is true, and I'm just going to say it confidently. I bet that that's different than it was, say, 30, 40 years ago, as the influence of, and I think it's different partly because of what you said in terms of if the state is the most important ruling thing in your life, then it would make sense to invest more into that. But I think it's partly true just because we're less Christian. In other words,
shifting demographics.
It's shifting demographics. There's less Christians in the West, in the United States.
And the new religion for many people is politics, right?
Yeah.
It is politics. And so here's the deal. That's fact number one. Fact number two, there are a lot of those now because of exactly what you're mentioning, Jesse, that there is a shift in ideology in terms of what is good, right, true, beautiful, and moral, right? That we used to probably even 50 years ago. And this is this isn't just for like who's in power, who's not. This is across demographics. You talk to some of my, I was in the Black Culture Club from 8th to 12th grade, and my parents' friends, right, were very, very clear on right and wrong. And that was broadly shared across even black people, white people, in America, in terms of basic worldview. Now that's not the case, and not just race, but just in terms of ideology. There are people that, have very different views of what is good, right, true, and beautiful. And that crosses money, your racial groups, the kind of things that there's just skewed differences where we don't agree on these things at a base level, right? What is good? What is bad? I mean, you literally have a political fight today between folks that believe you're doing evil to young people if you don't allow them to use hormone blockers and transition their gender as kids, right?
Yeah.
And other people that think that's basically child abuse, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you reconcile that, that polarized level of disagreement on what's good, right? And because of that, there are people and Christians who have different moralities, and maybe they're choosing to vote based on these things. And so anyone who has a different view on some baseline things is going to be politicized and even demonized by both sides, right, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about how that we're not going to do all the political theory here. We're not going to introduce this sort of Christian theory of politics and political engagement. But this is really helpful to set the stage for why it's hard to answer the question, or why it's fraught with so much weight, so much pressure. It's a pressurized conversation.
Yeah.
Often when you're talking with someone about why are Christians so political.
Yeah.
Because all of this is kind of coming in. You're carrying a lot of weight.
That's right.
That suitcase is packed full, and often full of not just opposed worldviews, but even to the point of saying, you are a wicked person.
Yes, you're evil. No, you're evil. And
which, by the way, I want to give a shout out. I wasn't planning to do this, but if you're going to, if you are looking for a really simple, really short book on Christian political theory, I want to recommend Robert Benny, who's a friend of mine, used to teach at Roanoke College. He's got a fantastic little book called Good and Bad Ways to Think About Religion and Politics. Very small. I recommend it to people all the time, especially election years.
Yeah. And we'll put that in the show notes for you guys. Jesse, send me that link.
Yep.
But when you're at a place in a joint shared cultural life together where in politics, the discussion of ideas and policies is you're evil. No, you're evil. It's very, very difficult, and it's laden with emotions when you're talking about what you think is good and true and beautiful. It's very difficult. So the fact that Christians aren't the most politically engaged people in America, and that there is this kind of demonization that's happening, both from Christians and people that aren't, and people who are kind of maybe communicating the stories, right? Putting it on television or talking about who is the villains now. I mean, even now, we're like Christian nationalists, whatever that is. I mean, we had a friend, David Ritchie, who wrote a book kind of concerning about Christian nationalism on this podcast. Like, that's going to be a major villain now in our politics, whatever that may be. So,
and by the way, it's a villain. and the range of
what that
people
could
that
mean.
covers, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not a Christian nationalist, I don't think, except for that when I hear the way it's used in mainstream media,
on
I'm like, oh yeah, well then I
when
am,
they said
for sure.
the lady on NBC who said that, like, if you believe human rights come from God, you're a Christian nationalist.
I'm like, okay, then I am, and that makes me the bad guy.
Yeah, and Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who was not a Christian, right? He would be a Christian nationalist too, supposedly. I don't know. He was a deist, but if you didn't know that. All right, so we're not just concerned with arguing facts. This is a big mistake, guys, that a lot of Christians will make when somebody says, why are Christians so political? And you just go into the political food fight with someone else. And we're not being a wise witness in a raging culture. We're just participating in the raging culture.
We're raging.
That's right. So remember, we're trying to listen to people and trying to disrupt assumptions so we can talk to people about Jesus. And so remember, we talked about the wise use of questions. So if your friend were to say, hey, why are Christians so political? Why do they just want power? A very simple question we can ask is like, what makes you say that? And look, at that point, what do we want to do? Listen. Listen, because people might say, well, I saw it on TV. I saw it on CNN that said all Christians care about is power. Or I heard, maybe a minister say that, right? Because they were, selling their book, or, hey, all they care about is this. And so that question alone will help us see where someone's coming from. They might be themselves a political idolater. They may think politics is everything, and they're just wanting to find someone to fight with. If that's the case, we don't have a genuine interlocutor. We don't have a genuine friend who's seeking truth together.
Yeah, it's not a good faith conversation that point.
That's right.
Yeah.
Professor Jay Budziszewski, he's at the University of Texas, Austin, political theorist, philosopher, wrote a book years ago called How to Stay Christian in College, and he talked about people asking questions that aren't genuine or sincere. Sometimes they're just smoke screens.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, this is where we don't give our pearls to swine. If somebody's just trying to grind on Christians or grind on politics and just trying to fight us, I'd rather go eat chicken wings with a friend in that case. And so, what
you
makes
might not want to quote that verse when you tell them you don't want to have the conversation. You might though.
No, you would just say, seems like this stuff. My question is why this makes you very angry, or this seems to be coming from a place of a lot of fear. What are you afraid that Christians want to do to you? And then listen, because there might be like, I think they're going to throw me in a gulag if I don't believe in and so that gives us insight of how to talk to this person. Because someone's genuinely afraid, we're going to talk later in this podcast at the end, Jesse, in a few minutes about, hey, separation of church and state, freedom of religion. That doesn't come from like atheism, right? That comes from a genuine desire for people to have a conscience that can believe or not believe, which comes from our view of the world from Christianity. So asking question, what makes you say that? What seems like you're angry, seems like you're afraid. And then if you want to bring a fact in, a simple question, did you realize that Christians are actually some of the least political active people in the culture? Both
in terms of religion and irreligion, non-religion.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and that is a disruptive question.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And then with our friends,
you might even ask, because typically the answer probably there is going to be like, that's not true, or no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Why do you think you've never heard that?
Yes.
Because then you maybe can get around to like, there are people who are making a lot of money over this anger that you have or we have.
Yes.
Because anger sells, outrage sells, advertising and so on. Anyway, why do you think you never heard that?
Amen. And as we look to listen and also start shifting the script, so to speak, and disrupt maybe some assumptions. Here's some other good questions. Again, we're trying to have conversations to preach the gospel, not just win fights. So how do you think what do you think Christians should do as citizens of America, right? There's some Christians in the country. What do you think they should do? Should they vote or should they not vote? And let people answer these questions, not use them as a way to keep talking, right?
Yeah.
Should they vote?
Should there be a religious test before allowing someone to vote? Like you just can't be too religious.
Yeah,
if you're too Muslim, you just can't vote.
Well, this was precisely what was done to the Supreme Court justice. The woman who's a Roman Catholic, I can't think of her name right now, but they were like saying, well, yeah, we're okay with her. Well, she's too Catholic, right? It's like, what does that mean? And I think all of us, when we pause and ask this kind of stuff, is like, hey, do you think that people should have to have a certain religion or ideology before voting. No, I thought we have a democracy, right? That people of all ideas can vote, and that together we come to that consensus through the ballot box, right? Do we want to simply suppress people and only allow them to vote if they believe what we think they should believe pre-voting? We should ask people that, because I don't think anybody who really likes kind of a free society is going to go there openly. Yeah, we should oppress them and hold them all down. It's like, well, what religion is that we're having to adhere to enable us to vote? So, and then finally, I think making this personal is a good way to disrupt the conversation from being a political food fight that say, hey, I'm a Christian, right? Are you interested in what I might believe about these things? And I think that's a wonderful open-ended question, because somebody might say, no, I don't want to hear anything about your stupid stuff, whatever. Again, if that's the case, go get chicken wings with your friends. It is a better use of your time. But this is an invitation, right? And I think this is a great question for lots of different cultural issues. Hey, I am an actual follower of Jesus. Are you interested in what I might think about this? And don't start preaching at that point. Just say, if they say, yeah, I would love to hear what you actually think about that. That is a different ground of the conversation, Jesse. And if we're on those grounds now, where somebody is giving you an invitation to share about what I think about Christians and politics, then we have an opportunity that's real and genuine to share the hope that we have. And so this is the closest we're going to get to political philosophy today. But a few quick thoughts, if someone did say, yeah, I would love to hear for that, is the first principle that we believe in is, and as Americans, I hope you believe in this too, the separation of religion and government, or as it's come down to in our tradition, the separation of church and state. Jesse, where on earth might that idea come from? It doesn't come from Islam. Islam does not have this, right? They have a union of religion and state in Islam, right? Because this comes directly from Prophet Muhammad, who was a prophet, a warrior, and the political leader, all in one, right? And that's kind of unified in Islamic vision. Like, what do you mean we don't have the law of God as the law of the land? Could we possibly get this separation of church and state idea from?
Well, as a U.S. American, we would think we would think about people like Thomas Jefferson, even before that, Roger Williams, a Rhode Island Baptist
I
pastor.
walked through a park in February dedicated to him.
Oh, yeah, of
reading
course.
all the
Up
little
in
plaques in
Brown
Providence.
Yeah. So Roger Williams, who was agitating as a Baptist pastor for the freedom to be a Baptist, right? And so you've got back in 1644, he wrote about a call for a wall or a hedge of separation. Of course, Jefferson, wrote about that with the Danbury Baptists,
Connecticut Baptist. Yep.
Yeah, in Connecticut. That's right. There's the Establishment Clause, right, which starts by prohibiting Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Which, by the way, and this is, you can get into this with these kind of questions too. These conversations around, what does this separation mean? Does it mean what most?
You can't talk about God.
Yeah, a naked public square. As far as naked meaning, you're not allowed to bring your religious sort of convictions into the public square, which is.
Nonsense.
You might ask questions around like, how do you do that? What does that look like? To what do you have to leave behind? What can you bring in? But we would actually say this goes further back to the Lord of Lords, Jesus.
Yeah. Or one final thought on the Establishment Clause. That means we're not going to have the Episcopalian Church, the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church be
as
the religion of the United States.
There's no sponsored
paying taxes to pay tithes, hire ministers, which is your European model. No. Separation of church and state.
And in our modern times, and this is really popular to think about this more in terms of freedom of religion means you have the freedom to worship privately or on Sundays or Saturdays, not the freedom to be a Baptist in all the ways that Baptist is, or Hindu, when you're voting or you're buying things, or in commerce or
running for president, right?
Which is what our founders intended with the Establishment Clause, that we're not going to have tithes being paid by taxes.
But every session of Congress opening with prayers, for a long forever. Still today, it's a little weird now, but go ahead. Yeah. So, but this doesn't come from these people,
right? Because we see this in Matthew 22 with Jesus. I'm going to read Matthew 22:17 17 to 22. When tell us then what you think. Is it lawful? There's a quiz being put to Jesus. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?
Do I have to use TurboTax on April 15th?
This is. And if you're late, get on it. But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they marveled, and they left him and went away.
This is not only where the principle of, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, to God what separation comes from, but it also is, if you want to notice, how to deal with hostile questioners.
Yeah.
Jesus is artful here, beautiful. I mean, obviously he's the best, but he's clearly saying, yes, pay your taxes, but yet what belongs to God is even more important, obviously. Yeah. So this is important because Christians have existed throughout all ages under various forms of governments, right? We've even done
often very antagonistic.
That's right. That's right. We've done a podcast. I'll try to dig it out of the archives, guys. We've done a podcast called Christians in Government on the Gospel Underground, looking at, hey, Christians have thrived, obeyed Jesus, walked in his mission under empires, under clan-based kind of family governments, say like in ancient Ireland, under democratic processes, under monarchies that had democratic processes, under communism, right? Under socialistic regimes, Christians have thrived and flourished. And by that, I don't mean they weren't persecuted, sometimes put to death, but they were able to be faithful to Jesus, right? Wherever they put us. And this is important because parts of the New Testament, right, were written under the Roman Empire, which, was like, oh, it's great, we have roads and aqueducts. But they also achieved a lot of their peace by putting a boot in, the Roman sword in people and saying, okay, now great, we got nice peace. So there's passages like Romans 13, 1 Peter 2, Titus 3, right, that encourage and exhort us to be subject to the governing authorities and be good citizens of the realm, so to speak, whatever the government may be. Now, if the government is compelling us to sin, disobey God, we're like the apostles, judge for yourselves. Who should we obey, God or you? Then we, nonviolent civil disobedience, we resist the tyranny or the tyrant. So if you're not familiar with those passages, we're just going to read them quickly as we wrap up here. Romans 13, Jesse, you want to read that?
Yeah, Romans 13, 1 through 4. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer.
Okay, 1 Peter 2, 13 through 17. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good, this is great for a wise witness in a raging culture, by doing good, you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, but not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but live as servants of God. Honor everyone, love the brothers, fear God, honor the emperor. L'empereur.
And then Titus 3, 1 through 5 says this, remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy toward all people. For we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray, slaves to various passions and pleasures, passing our days in malice and envy, hated by others and hating one another. But when the goodness and loving kindness of God our Savior appeared, he saved us not because of works done by us in righteousness, but according to his own mercy, by the washing of regeneration and renewal of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
And you have that in verse 1, be submissive to rulers and authorities. This is not, in the context, this doesn't mean elders in the church. This means the rulers and authorities over you in the civic sphere.
That's right. That's right. This is a theme in the New Testament under empire. that, look, if the laws are not evil or unjust or telling you to do that which is contrary to your conscience and the will of God, you obey it, right? Yeah. We're not just rebels without a cause. We're not just, hey, I don't care. I want to go at this traffic light when it's red light, not green. This would be foolish and dumb. And so there is no benefit to the gospel or to us and our families to just be rebellious against authority that's for our good even, right? That we would have a sensible rule of law in our society. Now, when the government tells you to do evil or tries to make you, you say, nope, ain't not doing that. And then I will stand up to that with my brothers. Now, over time in history, there have been thinkers that wrestled with this stuff, right? And I'll just share briefly a couple of them. We got to wrap up because Jesse and I got to get to our lunch appointments. Thomas Aquinas has a wonderful treatment of the law, where there's eternal or divine law that governs the church. There's natural law, the law written on the heart, Romans 2, that governs the moral sphere, and we should govern by that, right? And then there's civil law, stuff that we do to make things better as we do it, stop signs being stopped, right? That kind of thing. And if we see that, it's easy to see, like later on, Dutch politician in the 20th century, Abraham Kuyper, I think he was 20th century, maybe born in the 19th century. Turn of the century. Yeah. He kind of articulated this view of sphere sovereignty, that there is authority and sovereignty in different spheres of life together, the family, the state, right, the church, right? And so we should respect those spheres of sovereignty, that the government shouldn't infringe on the rights of Christians in their churches. The state should not infringe on the authority of parents, right, in the home, the responsibility that's been given by God. And so with these principles, we follow Jesus in our homes, in our churches, and in the city as good citizens, and we're allowed to vote our conscience. Now, here's the thing. Christians are going to stand for certain things. One of those is the idea of every human being being valuable, being made in the image of God. And so this idea of being for human life, from, like people say, womb to tomb, is something we want to advocate for. It doesn't eliminate death. It doesn't eliminate suffering. It doesn't mean that if we get the government right, we have utopia. We don't believe that. We think that actually leads to tyranny, or you're trying to enforce stuff on everyone. But so that humans flourish, rights do come from God, Jesse. They don't come from government. I don't know if that's Christian national or not, but the bottom line for a Christian is that, the final question there, Jesse, in our thing, if we ask this question, I think we're going to be in good shape. What if Jesus is Lord and not politicians, and maybe we act like it, right?
Yeah, and just my last word here today, Reed, is I think that's one of those answers I'm willing to give someone if they ask, including a Christian brother or sister, is, why are Christians so political? Well, first of all, are you sure about that? Like we talked about. But in the end, it's, hey, the statement Jesus is Lord, which I believe as a Christian means something. Yeah, now, how we've got to figure out how to work it out. It's not always a straight line. But
and in the complexity of life out of the garden under the sun, there are many solutions to very varied problems that we work out through a peaceable process, at least we hope. Our pathway, I tell my kids this all the time, Jesse, our pathway is this. We're to love God. We're to love our neighbors. We're to love our enemies. We love people in truth, not just being nice, right? Our goal is clear. No matter what government is over us, we want to build a relationship with God, strong families, strong marriages, churches, communities. Vote your conscience in a sinful world, and then share the good news with our politicized friends.
Amen.
And don't be a political idolater. The Gospel Underground, Jesse, is sponsored by us and you, the Bonhoeffer House. Review us on iTunes, 5-star, Spotify, hit us up, Amazon Music, wherever, Google, YouTube podcast. 5 stars are acceptable. Send your feedback. Don't send your mean, angry political screed to me, but you can send it to feedback or info@gospelunderground.org. Where dialogue taking place in politicized times, in the borderlands between the church and culture, living for God in our time and space, because we have the privilege and honor to do so. Peace.